It was working for a change.
Shadow Knows, the Shadow Crew podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another fine episode of the Shadow Crew podcast, the Shadows Knows podcast, the whatever the hell Shadows cast,
Knows, the Shadow Crew podcast.
Whatever you want to call us, we're happy that you're tuning in, listening. Thanks for being a part of our evening as a bunch of friends and colleagues get together to shoot the shit and talk about anything we want to talk about, which is typically around some pop culture and sci-fi, action figures, comic books, etc. So thanks for tuning in. We have one member missing this week, but soon to return next week. So Mr. Chet Maddox will be back with us, but definitely missing his presence this week. But fellas, I'm super excited to get into some really great topics. I know last week there were some really hot topics around some films, and we got into our favorite weapons from movies. So that's super excited. But I think the first thing that I'd love to talk about is we got a lot of comic book films, television. Over the past 15, 20 years, it's been rampant. And I think we all can agree, outside of your Warner Brothers related films, at least some of them, that Marvel/Disney have executed it really well for the most part. But with this recent change in characters after Endgame, it seems like it feels like that things are going a bit downhill. So the question to you all is, did the era of superhero films end with Tony Stark's snap? If you all remember Endgame, the snap, Thanos and everyone else goes bye-bye.
Bye, Felicia.
Was that the conclusion? And what are you all feeling about superhero films, TV series in general? So I want to get right into it.
There's a couple of great outliers that show up every now and then. I thought The Batman was a decent film. It wasn't as good as most of the other Batman films, but it was decent.
I'm vengeance.
But most of Marvel's films after that have kind of suffered. And I don't know, it's because they replaced most of the A-list Marvel characters and ideas. I'm surprised that they didn't just recast those characters. But it seems like that was definitely the downturn in the industry when it came to, I guess, people's hype on these superheroes.
Yeah, Marvel, the only thing they had after that was Spider-Man and Doctor Strange that were pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then all the TV shows have been not great to terrible. And
I would beg to differ, though, because I thought Loki was an outlier.
Okay. Loki was all right.
Yeah. Compared to the other ones, yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, they were on top. Like every movie that came out was $1 billion movie, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and it wasn't because of the pandemic. It was because their movies just took a turn for the worse.
Yeah. Do you think that is because the majority of the characters, because I think they went like with Disney Plus and the streaming service that launched a few years ago, they were adamant about getting content out. So I think they redirected their focus on supplying content to Disney Plus, as they did with the Star Wars universe Disney we're talking about. Do you feel like the TV series honed in on characters that were less known, and that's part of the problem? I think about like WandaVision, Loki, Winter Soldier, and the new Captain. Like, is that it, or was it just shit stories?
No, that's not the problem, because you can tell any great story with any character, and it will be successful if it's a good story. But even a terrible character, if you've got a good story, people will show up for it. If you've got, they have good characters, it's just what they did with it wasn't very good.
Yeah.
And I do think it was such a dramatic change. You had what possibly 7, 8, 10 years of like great characters that we built up time and time again, and it climaxed with all the Avenger films, and then you said, well, these guys aren't around anymore. And so now these are the new characters that you have to accept. And even in the comic books, those characters are still not as beloved as I guess the originals. So I think that they hurt themselves. And I was seeing what Michael or Bob Iger stated about, like, he thought that the television shows diluted the brand, and I don't think that was the case. I just think that they, possibly, I think they went to more experimental directors, more experimental writers. I saw that article where the Secret Invasion writer said, well, I was told not to read the books. Now, they had gotten to be a point pretty faithful from the original inception of it. And so now all of a sudden you're going away from, well, don't read Secret Invasion. And I thought, okay, this is probably upper management trying to, dictate some thoughts here, and it's being brought back down. But I think it's just not the right individuals that they're getting. And let's say a la like the Star Wars brand. They're getting some passionate people on that side of the board. But I think with Marvel, they're just cookie cutting people in, writers and directors and showrunners that have no prior history with the characters.
Yeah. It's a problem if you look at all of the TV from Marvel post Avengers, that in my opinion, the best one to date was a one-shot, Werewolf by Night. That's just my that's kind of embarrassing though. You know what I mean? That was your best attempt. I will say controversially, I did like Moon Knight.
No,
because I think
Moon Knight,
it was way different. It was way different. It didn't feel connected to any of, it felt like it's completely different, almost as if Disney had nothing to do with it. I did enjoy that. There was a couple episodes of different series, like Loki. I thought there was a couple episodes that are good, but I think it's just become not only bad writing, it's just way too confusing. I think this the multiverse, it's too much. And
I think
then you just don't have the powerhouse actors either. Like, you got Sam Jackson, who was not good, but you don't have the Downey Jr. Like, there's just something about it. So, I mean, are we in trouble here? Do you think can they salvage it? Just, I'm such a Marvel fan. It'd be really disappointing if this is like really the end, and inevitably it's like they'll start canceling series. Like, do you think it's that in danger, or do you think it's just a blip in time and maybe something will come about and then turns this whole universe around?
Well, we've been hearing for years that the superhero genre, it's going to go like the way the Western genre did, or the way the cop era did, or and those eras are still around. When you have good material and you treat the material with the respect that it deserves, people will flock to it. And there's outliers right now. So, Shazam 2 wasn't as good as Shazam 1. Black Adam wasn't as good as most of the Marvel films. But for every, I say now, seems like 5 or 6 bad films, there's a good one that comes out. And we sit back and we're like, wow, that's actually a pretty good film. So, I just think it's treating the source material correctly, but also I think the problems with the television shows are, I think there's too many filler episodes. They're writing a plot that probably should be for 3 episodes, or like one, like Werewolf by Night, and they're trying to get 6 to 8 episodes out of it, and it's just the plot is not conducive of the actual storytelling that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things, I think Mr. Storm said it right, was respecting the source material, because when they get away from what made the character popular, oh, surprise, nobody wants to watch that. You
Mhm.
know, it's it's like, actually go back, read the stuff. Don't read that because we can't afford to get Captain America back on this. We got Sam Jackson, that's enough. So they have to figure out how to actually respect that, why these stories were popular in the first place, because there's plenty of stories, comic book arcs, that are terrible and nobody talks about them, but for some reason there's some that people are talking about 40, 50, 60 years later, and you treat them right and they'll treat you right.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the era of more humorous attempts at comic book movies, the traditional Marvel style, where most of the movies had a really, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers had a kind of a lighthearted, there were some dark parts, obviously. And do you think it'll start to pivot towards like Joker type of like real dark, real gritty? Because that film did really well. Like, do you think like that's the next phase, is to maybe go darker? I don't know if Disney would do it, but like you think about DC, Beetle's a
DC's
big
always been
flop.
dark.
But I mean, like, does it get to that level? Like Joker, there's a lot of controversy of like there wasn't a one element of that movie where you smiled. It was like, I think there's a lot of criticism about like mental health, and it went really deep psychologically for a lot of people. And now they're making a sequel. I know they're talking about it's going to be a lot of music. I don't know what the hell's going on there. But do you think that's the way to maybe save comic books, is to go that route, or now you need a balance?
No, I mean, DC has always been darker than Marvel.
True.
And that's their brand. I think they should stick with that. That's why the Zack Snyder movies were darker. Some people didn't like that because they weren't the Marvel, but that's not what DC is. They've always had sort of a darker, more mythic feel to all the stories. The Marvel is quick quips, and Spider-Man saying a joke as he's catching the bad guys. So I don't think that would work for Marvel going forward. They need to stick with what's kept them going, but just go back to what worked.
Well, I'm looking at, like, all right, we think about Aquaman, and that's not as dark as Snyder's version, but it took the best elements out of it, and it also incorporated better elements. Wonder Woman, not as dark as Zack Snyder, took the best elements, but incorporated different elements. I think when you do a even balance, I think it works. Flash didn't take any elements from Zack Snyder and didn't bring any elements in. I think it's just, and that one, I think the Flash looked like that was heavily executive handed. That looked like there was a lot of notes, and a lot of people were telling the director what to do and their vision and everything. And I think you can be too heavy-handed into the creative process. But when it works well. Like, again, Aquaman's not as dark as Superman and Batman: Dawn of Justice, but it plays better to the general audience than I think Superman and Batman does. I think that Guardians of the Galaxy is good, but it doesn't play for Marvel as well as, let's say, the Winter Soldier, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Do you have to learn how to have your balancement in it? And I think Ant-Man suffered because the first two films were extremely fun, extremely family friendly. And then the third film became something completely different of the first two. And it came a little bit darker and a little bit more confusing for the audience members that saw the first two films.
Yeah. It became less about Ant-Man and more about developing a villain for future movies. And people were like, I came to see Ant-Man. I don't really
and I think they did
this.
a terrible job developing that villain as well.
Yeah.
If you're going to if you do Kang, you've got to do somebody that you care about. And I think that it almost was like they did a comedy sketch with the guy, and he went from, being nice, and then he went from yelling at people to, and the end sequence was just something where you're like, okay, did they just spitball this in the room and throw this together? I think they really hurt Kang it's like when we saw Thanos show up, it was like, okay, we knew this character was going to be like a contender for the worst Marvel villain we had seen. Kang shows up and you're like, well, I think they need to look for another villain that's going to go in the other films, because I don't think Kang's going to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up with Josh Brolin. I mean, he did
Yes.
I think that's underrated, like an underrated role there. I mean, he really captured the essence of I think it's one thing I think he did tremendously well that I don't think is ever executed. It's probably few or far between, is when you hate a bad guy, but then you also kind of, there's elements that you like him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could establish that balance, it's, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly,
you kind of like him, but then you're like, I think it did it really well. I mean, the writing had a lot to do with it, but it's great.
But what bad guy gets what he wants and then retires? He's like, you know what? I'm gonna go up to my farm now. I killed everyone. I'm good.
I mean, I was like, why do you have to chop his head off, man? He's just living life. His hands all burnt to shit. He's, I mean, the dude just wanted to get some fishing in, maybe plant some flowers.
But he killed half the known universe, man. He killed half the known universe.
I know, but in
order to attain what he wanted,
you gotta protect the senior citizens, man. You know what I mean? Come on.
That's a real estate opportunity. That is.
Yes. It'd be funny to do like if you. I know we're gonna do a really exciting little segment called Recast, but perhaps we explore like Rescene, which would be like Thanos is like the retirement community with other ex villains,
the Golden Girls.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. And if you threw a party, invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from me, and the card attached would say, thank you for being a friend.
Sitting there playing Scrabble and Thor chops his head off in front of everybody. I don't know. Might be something on. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Blue Beetle. I didn't even see it. I
didn't either.
I don't know, Alex, if you
I
unfortunately you sucked it up. Oh my!
I knew one of us had to actually do the grade and do it, so I actually went to go see it. And
sir, look, we're gonna give you a medal. You get a medal of achievement for sitting through that.
There was the lead actor. I thought he did a pretty good performance. He seemed well. I think the loose cannon in this, and it's unfortunately, is George Lopez. I think that they have somehow in these films they have a way of having this one outlandish character, and I thought with Awkwafina did a terrible job in Shang-Chi. Like they overstill the spotlight, and they're really just become from being funny to being annoying by the time he ended the film. And I think that it's unfortunate what George Lopez is. I think it's the second superhero film that he was in that was
really,
there was a low budget one where I think he was a cop. I can't remember the name of it, but it came out like several years ago, and it suffered the same fate. It went right in the theater and right out the theater. But I think that there was some good moments. I think if you're a person that it enjoys superhero films with a little bit of lightness to it, it had it in there. But I think as the overall public, you're not going to get people to go in there and see this film. He's too less of a character that absolutely no one knows. You would have to be a comic book character reader in order to go into the theater and know who Blue Beetle was. And that's like what, one out of every 100,000 people that might know who the character was. It was a poor film to do, and I think it just goes to show. I know they cut Batgirl several years ago, and they said that was unwatchable. And I think Blue Beetle kind of was one of those films where it didn't quite fit in the Snyderverse, and I don't know what they were doing with it. It just didn't make any sense. And again, I thought there were some good performances, but as an all, it's a skip, man.
Has anybody ever read a Blue Beetle comic book?
Only when he's been in like the Justice League.
Yeah,
or
I
Justice
mean, yeah,
Society
like
or
I've
something,
seen
you
he's
know?
made appearances, but like an actual solo Blue Beetle book.
I did not know. I haven't.
Unless it was part of the crossover stuff, I don't think so. But there was a lot of Blue Beetle, like when they did the Infinity Crisis and 52 and all that.
Yeah.
And so that was when I was heavily reading, and I think I got like all 52 weeks of that shit. I liked the character, but that was the old character. That was the Ted Kord. That wasn't the new guy. I haven't read any of the new Jaime Reyes stuff.
Well, the funny thing about that too is that it's exactly like the problem where, like Marvel with the Engines of Vengeance. Everyone knows who Ghost Rider is. Everyone knows who is Johnny Blaze or even Danny Ketch. But when you did Robbie Reyes, everyone was like, who's this character? The only thing they knew is that he drives like a muscle car. And it's a problem where you go 2, 3, 4 versions of the character, and a lesser known character makes it to the screen. I think you're hurting the franchise with that. So if they would have started the Blue Beetle with the actual original character, and then probably would have worked several films, and he has to pass the mantle down, I could see that probably working.
Or just do it in the first movie. It's like you
Yes.
start with Ted Kord established as the Blue Beetle. Something happens, he has to pass it on to Jaime.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do you all think about Ghost Rider possibly coming back into? No,
I
mean that's the rumor is
I
that
heard.
Ghost Rider is coming back.
But I heard it's Ghost Rider with Nick Cage.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm excited. I want to see Nick Cage's Ghost Rider. I don't want to see anybody else.
He
Ghost
had
Rider.
2 chances and they both sucked. So
and the worst part is the second film, he had probably one of the best living actors next to Denzel Washington. He had Idris Elba in it, and they couldn't make the second film good. And I think they didn't treat that with the respect it did. I heard a couple of years ago they were talking about Keanu Reeves for the role, and I think that probably would have been great. But this multiverse kind of scenario, I just sat through the Flash when it was on the Max, and it was just reliving the point. Like no, they need to stop having all these characters pop in from the old shows and everything else like that. I love the nostalgia factor, but sometimes you pushed it too far. And I think bringing Nick Cage back, although I've heard a rumor that this is supposed to bring Wesley Snipes back as Blade, and he's supposed to be I guess a multiverse version of it.
Oh, come on. I mean,
I would kind of be down to see him show up back one more time, man. Not a whole film, but maybe like a cameo or something.
I don't know. I would take Wesley Snipes in a whole Blade film now. If it was up to 1 or 2 level, I would take that.
But they're making one with what's the other actor, right?
Ali.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think he'd be.
Well, they keep trying to make it. They keep trying to make it because it stopped and started, stopped and started. So I don't know.
Oh, the script sucks.
Yeah.
I do have to ask about stop rumors. When will it be here? I think probably the film that we have heard that it will recast it is Spawn. Is that is a live action ever going to come? Has McFarlane basically said, "Nah, I'm okay," because in my opinion, I mean, the animated series is probably in my opinion, one of the best of all time in terms of comic books. Like, I kind of set the bar, like being on HBO, one of the first ever like comic book animated series. They could redo it with all the CGI stuff. They could like make a really great series out of it. But he's caught up in the action figure world. You think Spawn will we ever see a live action version in some facet, or is Spawn kind of in the past and most people don't even know who the hell Spawn is?
I think that Spawn had the potential of having it done right. And I think we've been talking about this since before the pandemic. Todd McFarlane keeps putting on his headlines, it's coming, it's not, this is changing. And I know he wrote that first screenplay for it that he took to Jason Blum. And I remember when he said, "Oh, it's going to be just like Jaws, and Spawn's only going to be in the movie for a couple of minutes." Well, okay, that's like, you have no business writing screenplays. It's like, it's titled Spawn. It's like, Spawn's going to show up for 5 minutes, and you're going to waste Jamie Foxx's performance for 5 minutes. I think the problem with Spawn is Todd McFarlane. I think that Todd McFarlane's his own worst enemy. I think he's a very talented guy. I think he's a great toy manufacturer. I think he has no business in Hollywood, because he has this version that he believes that his character should be. Should they keep it kind of faithful to the book in certain parts? But let's be honest, all Spawn does in the books is sit in the alley on like a perch, and that's about it. He doesn't really do too many fantastic things in the book, and I think the book's up to 350 issues. I think that he's hurt himself by overhyping this character. Hey, we're doing a movie, and I'm doing it with Jason Blum, and I'm doing it, and every couple of like months, 6 months, every convention, he's like, it's coming. I think he's his worst enemy when it comes to this movie, because one, you're right, Chris. No, outside of the comic book community and maybe a couple of people, not one exec knows who Spawn is. No. Nobody knows who Spawn is. No, he had the best-selling book 300 because he printed 300 copies of the book. That doesn't make him on the same level as Superman, Batman, or any of the lesser known. I think people knew Moon Knight more than they knew who Spawn was. You know,
that's true. I mean, I think there's only one way to say that. Nicolas Cage as Spawn live action. I mean, let's go for it.
I think they did that. It was called Renfield. I just saw that.
So animation, Mario Brothers destroying the box office, absolutely kicking ass. The new Pixar film Elemental killing it internationally, surpassing Toy Story and a few other of those things. Ninja Turtles doing really well. The Spider-Man animation just crushing it. Outside of Barbie and Oppenheimer, nothing else has really clicked. Are we thinking maybe animation is the future of comic book films and video games? What are your thoughts? I mean, it's definitely cheaper.
Well, not necessarily.
Really? So you think budget wise,
Pixar movies, that was the problem. Lightyear cost so much money; it was like $200 million or more.
That's just
it had no chance of making that. But the thing about animation is that you can be faithful to the look of the characters. Like Mario Brothers, that looked just like the animation that they showed on the package, not on the game, but on the package of the game. Sonic, when they did live action version, he looked like a monstrosity that was like a hedgehog human hybrid. And then people saw that and were like, no, that's awful. They changed it to look more like the cartoon character, and it was a huge hit, and now they're making their third movie.
And I can go with this. My second to youngest nephew is a huge Sonic fan. He's in love with Sonic. And when he saw the movie, it looked like the video game. It looked like some of the coloring books and everything that he associated with. I think the reason why Super Mario Brothers did well, one, it's a world-renowned franchise. I think, it's almost, you could put that maybe on the same level as like maybe Batman or Superman, somebody that does not speak English that could look at the Mario Brothers and know, due to the video game, who that character was. But also, look at these three films. What are we talking about? These three films, the reason why they're so popular, because they actually cater to an actual general audience. Parents went to go see it. Children went to go see it, and everyone walked out of the theater with a good time. The same thing with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the same aspect where, most of the Pixar movies, I think that because they're appealing to a greater audience, and I know Spider-Man, into the Spider-Verse does extremely well because, like Dr. Brentley said, is that you can 100%. They look like the characters that look like they leapt off from either the book or through the packaging and everything onto the screen. But second is that it catered to an audience that there was no one left out. It wasn't too adult for children, and it wasn't too children for adults. And I think that Marvel and DC should really pay attention because they have the opportunities of taking their characters and building it to. You want to get more kids to go into the comic book stores? You do things that look like they came from the comic book market. We look how big manga is. One Piece, the animation looks just like the manga. You can get an actual fan from one to the next. I think that if you're going to go a cheaper route than having Chris Pratt and all these mega stars that you're paying all this money to, you do the characters, you do great animated films. I think you will get more newer people coming in, newer audiences from younger that will go over multi-line with those characters, man.
Yeah, because no matter how much makeup you use, Bob Hoskins is not going to look like Mario.
No. And John Leguizamo wasn't he a little bitter that he wasn't the next one? Like, why am I not in this next one? It's like, did you see your first performance, brother? You gotta ask why they didn't ask you back.
I just want to see like Mickey Mouse live action and how like terrorizing it will be to kids.
Now, Nicolas Cage, I would see him as Mickey Mouse.
Yes, love it.
What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Oh, my eyes! My eyes! Ah!
And Nicolas Cage would happily take that money.
Yes.
Hey, man, stop.
Yeah, exactly. We're almost out of time here for the episode, but on the animation front, as we wrap things up, is there a franchise? Is there a character? Is there perhaps like a Spawn that's been talked about, that another live action that you would rather see as animation? Anything that you've recently watched that would have been like, could have been better as an animation or CGI?
I can't say better, but I would like to see a John Wick animated.
Ooh, yeah.
Especially like in a manga style or something, kind of like Cowboy Bebop. I would like to see John Wick animated.
Yeah,
I would say Moon Knight, because I love the character of Moon Knight, but they spent so much time sort of setting up the character that they didn't do much with actual Moon Knight fighting crime or doing any of that kind of stuff. So like seeing him like they do the Batman animated, where it's just like that character in his element and doing his stuff, people would see, what's the appeal of the character rather than, just catching you up to speed.
I hadn't thought about that, but that would actually probably be cool, Dr. Brennan.
Yeah, that would definitely be great. I think they've done like an anime style, but I always thought like if you really did it well, and not that style, but like a really like dark animation, like this, like Starship Troopers would be badass as like an animated series, just because like how expensive they did a great job in a cheesy way, years and years ago when CGI was as great as it is now, but animation would be so awesome. So I know they did one.
I think they did one,
yeah, but not to the level that I think they could today. Sure. In like 6 or 8 episodes.
But I mean, if you do that like on Netflix or somewhere like that, or Amazon, you can do like an R-rated version.
Oh yeah, it would need to be.
You don't make a kid's version of it. But you have the spaceships and everything 3D animated, so you've got all that kind of stuff and the bugs, and you could just do a lot of fun stuff with that.
Yeah, it would be cool to see. I got to rewatch that movie. But it's just like it's like super underrated film. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up this episode. Any TV film you all watching now that's that stood out to you? And I always ask that, but I know every week there's some new content out. What are you all feeling about the new Star Wars series? It's 3 episodes in. Anybody caught up to speed on that? Ahsoka.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think the pacing is still 3 episodes in. I know we're probably going to go to 6, and probably by episode 5, everything will start moving a little bit faster. But I think they've done a good job with the characters. I know Dr. Brentley and I talked about this a couple of days ago, where he stated that it was probably the most Star Wars since, what'd you say, man?
Since the George Lucas prequels.
Yeah.
It just felt like Star Wars more than the Disney stuff has.
Yeah, I think that's Dave Filoni. Like, I think that's just, again, if there's anybody that I trust to make it happen, I'm just waiting to see Thrawn. I don't know how long are they going to draw this out. And I hope it's not the last episode, a little teaser, and then it goes to season 2.
2 minutes of the last episode, he'll come in and then they'll shut it down.
I remember reading the books.
Yes.
And like Thrawn being in there, and it was like post that, like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, they never, like, it would have been cool if they did that. Maybe that's an animated thing. Like, maybe if they take that, like,
I mean, you could do all those original characters, like fill in all the gap timeline with animation. You don't have to worry about recasting or doing a deep fake with all those characters.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, listening in, and we'll see you next week.